Hello and welcome to the Face the Nation diary for Friday, the 22nd of January. The enemy of my enemy is a little bit less of my enemy today than he was yesterday because it seems like my enemy could get the nomination. Edition. We're all hiding under our desks here at Face the Nation with blizzard conditions anticipated for Washington. We had planned to do some interviews on the road, but those plans were shot, which isn't to say that we're throwing away our shot. We're used to endorsements during campaigns. Candidates parade around with senators, governors who lend their credibility to the campaign. There haven't been that many on the GOP side this year because there's so many candidates, and people are reluctant to get behind one of them. We've seen a few, but this week we saw a blast of the anti-endorsement. I talked about it earlier with respect to Terry Branstad, who came out against Ted Cruz this week. But for an Iowa governor, that was understandable because he has a different position on the renewable fuel standard than Cruz. But after that, a torrent of anti-endorsements took place. First, the anti-Cruz endorsements. Bob Dole, the former majority leader and 96 nominee for the Republican Party, said he thought Donald Trump would be better than Ted Cruz because Donald Trump would make deals in Washington, even though Trump has called all the lawmakers in Washington idiots and stupid. Trent Lott, also a former majority leader on the Republican side, said the same thing. Republican senators, Orrin Hatch, John Cornyn, Richard Burr, John McCain, all said disparaging things about Cruz. So it looked like the establishment was warming up to Trump. But no, just as you might have thought that, the National Review delivered a broadside with nearly 20 conservative luminaries, from Bill Kristol to John Podhoretz to Glenn Beck, explaining why Trump would be a disaster. The short version, he has no fixed principles. He's simply an authoritarian bully who doesn't know much about policy. The problem there is that, one, he could lose to Hillary Clinton, but two, if he ever got in office, he would just change his mind and make deals, and that would be a disaster for conservatism. In both cases, the candidates are probably happy to have the condemnation. Cruz has been running against the Washington cartel, and so having members of the cartel attack him is really better than anything he could possibly hope for. Same with Trump. Cruz has been beating on him as a tool of the establishment. And so here was the Establishment magazine, the one that they keep in the clubhouse where the establishment goes to be clubby. And they put out a special issue denouncing Trump with using words like excrescence and writing about dubious norms of the milieu, which is also a perfectly acceptable band name. You can imagine the billionaire reading those 10-cent words at his next rally and keeping his audience in stitches. This is not just a battle over tactics. These are people expressing deep in your bones feelings. First, about Cruz and his colleagues in the Senate. I've interviewed a fair number of them, and they have a very strong dislike of him. It's different than the irritation people used to have with ideological senators, fighters like Tom Coburn and Paul Wellstone. Their colleagues didn't like them because they were irritating, but it wasn't this kind of deep personal animus. There's another 10-cent word for you. There's a sort of peanut cluster of reasons that GOP senators don't like Cruz. But it essentially comes down to this, which is Cruz took tactical disagreements with his Republican colleagues and presented them to the grassroots as ideological fights, that anybody who was on the opposite side of him within the party was an ideologically weak person, not just that they had a different strategy. And that raised Cruz's stature at the expense of his colleagues, and then inflamed the grassroots about what was actually possible in Washington. Remember John Boehner, when he left the speakership, talked about people like Cruz, he called Cruz a jackass, for raising expectations in the country about what could be passed, which made actually passing anything a disaster. Trump stirs less personal antipathy, another 10-cent word, but he's posing a challenge in a different way, but that gets nevertheless deep in the bones again. In the National Review, all of the authors are searching their innermost hearts for what they believe conservatism means, why it's important to protect it, why Trump is a threat to it, and why he should be stopped from being a wrecking ball on the ideas that they believe and that have governed their lives and that they think are the best way to form a government. Writing in An online magazine called The Resurgent, which was started by Eric Erickson, the conservative pundit and quasi-activist. A man named Steve Berman writes of Trump, Christians, be careful what you ask for, because it might not be what you're really getting. To make America great, Trump will sacrifice biblical values, sink the country to a moral low point, defining success as winning in monetary, military, and nationalistic terms, and attack anyone who opposes him. As one pastor put it, if we elect this man to the White House the first time Christians disagree with him, we will get everything that's coming to us. How deep is the Cruz and Trump split with about 10 days to go before the voting starts in Iowa? It's even split the Duck Dynasty family. Phil Robertson came out for Cruz. Willie Robertson, his son, announced this week he's supporting Trump. No word yet on where Uncle Si is placing his chips. For Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.